Okay, good morning, Shavua Tov. So this morning we're trying to finish Psalm 94, Tzadi Dalit, and we began it last week, and I feel like I have to rush a little bit because not only do I want to finish the poem, then I want to talk about why it's the Psalm for Wednesday. So hopefully we'll have enough time. So the first 7 verses, the introduction, the beginning of the poem, is really very depressing, and it's begging God to please take revenge against the bad guys. We spoke a lot about that last week, and how we felt that was an appropriate emotion based upon what had happened in Pittsburgh. But you know, and then we ended that first section by people saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't see, doesn't pay attention, God doesn't care, you know. And then the second section, which is 8 through 15, begins with an admonition to the bad guys. Try to binu boarim ba'am. Try to understand, you empty-headed thugs. Okay. And what it's saying is, the point is, through Yud Aleph, is you're foolish to think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't pay attention, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees all and knows all. That's where we got to, and we're right now up to verse Yud Bet. Verse Yud Bet, even though it's in the middle of the second section, which is talking in general about Hashem's hashgacha, Hashem's supervision of the world, it's a little bit different than the first 4 verses. And these are very powerful, very beautiful psukim. And what happens is, in this middle section, each 2 verses sort of work together. They're sort of couplets, okay? So let's begin with Yud Bet. Ashrei hagever asher tiasrena ka umitoratcha telamdenu. Up until here, we've been talking about the bad guys. First, how terrible they are, and then an admonishment, don't be foolish, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does pay attention. And now the tone is still talking third person about these people, but it's saying, Ashrei. Usually we translate Ashrei as happy. I don't like that translation. I more like the translation fortunate. That you're better off. Ashrei means fortunate. You're better off is the person that is chastised by Hashem. Tiasrena ka. Now, tiasrena comes from the word that gives us musar. Musar it can be chastisement. We can say it's morality, it's ethics, the musar movement. Okay, someone that a rabbi that gets up and tries to change the direction of his students or his congregation is called the Baal Musar, right? And so, fortunate, you're in a good place. You should feel good about the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does chastise us and direct us in the correct way. Umi Toratcha, and from his Torah, Telamdenu, he teaches us. So in other words, we're so fortunate that we know right from wrong because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has taught us and informed us. I'm going to come back to this verse in a second. I just want to do the second verse, and we'll come back to it. And this chastisement, this understanding that there is a proper path, lahashkit lo mimeira, and that literally quiets. I like better in this context, calms that person from his evil days. It quiets him, gives him quietude, calm from the bad stuff that's happening. Ad yikoreh l'rosh hashachat, until there is a recognition that the bad guys are going to be destroyed. Mashchit, mushchat, destruction are going to be wiped out. So those two verses go together. But I want to go back to Yud Bet because there's a famous rabbinic idea based on Pasuk Yud Bet. And the rabbinic idea is that there are three things that Jews earn only through Yisurim, only through a combination of chastisement and sometimes even a certain amount of suffering. And those three things are Torah, which is this pasuk. This pasuk is the emphasis on Torah, but then the Gemara adds two others. One is Eretz Yisrael, and the third is Olam Haba. And it's a machloket what that Gemara means about Olam Haba. Sometimes we use Olam Haba to mean heaven. Sometimes we use Olam Haba to mean Yemot HaMashiach, the Messianic period. So to gain these three items, Torah requires Mesirat Nefesh, same word, requires self-sacrifice. That's the same word, Yisurin, Mesirat Nefesh. Getting or coming to Eretz Yisrael requires Mesirat Nefesh. We all know that. We see that in our own lives and in our generation, that sadly we've come so far here in Eretz Yisrael, but there's been tremendous sacrifices to do it. And we all had to sacrifice things to settle here. So, and the last one is Olam Haba, whether that means bringing the Mashiach or it means gaining your place in the world to come. I haven't experienced that one, so I don't have that much to say. So, but I imagine when the time comes, we'll all notice that it's true. Okay. If it means Olam Haba is Geula, then I can say B'meherav Yameinu. If it means our portion in the world to come, Admei of Esrim Shana. Okay, but so that's the famous thing that's done with verse Yud Bet. But you have to understand in the tone of the poem that God's going to teach and show the bad guys, what's right, and that's good, even if the learning lesson is a little bit painful. It's for their own good. Correct. No pain, no gain. That's the idea in Yud Bet and Yud Gimel. Excellent. Yud Dalet and Tet Vav also work together, and Yud Dalet is very, very famous. It's one of the three verses in the Psalm which has become a famous song. Ki lo yitosh Hashem. I should turn off the recorder so nobody can hear how badly I sing. Okay. V'nachal lato lo ya'azov. Right? But then we put another line to it, but it doesn't make a difference. But it's based on this, ki lo yitosh, that God will never forsake or abandon his people. That's the Jewish nation. Even though in the beginning of the poem, we talked about all these people that caused the nation suffering. And we saw an argument with those bad guys, Gentiles, were those bad guys Jews? I think pshat is that they were Jewish kings, the bad Jewish kings in like the 6th and 7th centuries BCE, right? But either way, but we're saying even though we're going through these bad times, we've got a bad king, and we've got we've got enemies at our gates. Nevertheless, you cannot give up that hope that a Kadosh Baruch Hu will never abandon us. V'nachalato, and God's portion, lo ya'azov. Now, I don't know how to translate yitosh and ya'azov. In other words, it's like one means abandon and one means forsake. Nitosh means to push away forcefully. Ya'azov means to like slip away in the middle of the night. Now, I don't know which words in English best fit in. Yitosh is forsake, and the other is abandon. Cast off. Oh, I like cast off for lo nitosh, because cast off means that it's more physical, like an action. Oh, I like that. The Hirsch, very nice. Cast off. God's never gonna dispose of us or throw us overboard. Okay. And the second part is more loving, and we're his portion, and God will never abandon us, slip away quietly in the middle of the night. You go to sleep, and then your caretaker's gone in the morning, type thing. That's not going to happen either. Both of those scenarios won't happen to the Jewish nation vis-a-vis our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So again, this part of the poem is more encouraging. Don't worry. You've got nothing to worry about. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is there. I know things are bad right now. Nevertheless, the Kadosh Baruch Hu is there. Ki ad tzedek yashuv mishpat va'achrav kol yishrei lev. Because justice will return to the point where everyone feels righteousness is being served. And after this, at that point, this after time is going to be like that. Everyone's going to see the justice has been preserved. Every Yishrei Lev will understand it. Sometimes bad things happen to people that deserve it. And people say, oh, let's have some Rahmanas on them. But sometimes having Rahmanas on someone that doesn't deserve it is cruel because they needed to be chastised. Both as a parent and as a teacher, we often would talk, especially in school, about what are we going to do about, Yeled X. We know he needs to be straightened out, but how are we going to do it? If we ignore it, if we let it go, it's going to be bad for him. But how do we go about doing it? So in other words, this pasuk is telling us of in the future, when the bad guys have all been chastised, and for some of them that's going to mean destroyed, as we can see at the end of the poem, we're still going to nod our head and say, it had to be that way. That was right. Sometimes you go to Khalila, an execution, and you say it was the right thing to do. Sadly, this person deserved to die. Serial killer or whatever it might be. The fellow in Pittsburgh. I was very happy to see that the U.S. attorney for Western Pennsylvania said he's going to seek the death penalty. There are sometimes when it's just appropriate. I'm not a big advocate for capital punishment. I'm not. But sometimes you say, it's right. It was the right thing to do. It was the right thing for society. It was perhaps even the right thing for him. So that's what's going on in Yudel and Tetvav. And it's giving some hope for the future. The end of the poem is almost a different poem. In the end of the poem, and look at verses Tet Zayin and Yud Zayin, and you notice the change. Each phrase has li, nafshi. We've been talking in the entire poem in the third person. Hi, Shavua Tov. We've been talking the entire person. I don't know if okay. We've been talking the entire poem in the third person. The last third of the poem is personal. It's about what has happened to the author. Now, again, who the author is, we don't know. It could be David HaMelech, but many Meforshim, as we said last time, believe this was written during the 700s, the 8th century BCE, when there were a number of enemies attacking Israel, and there were a number of rotten kings, including kings that sacrificed their own children to Molech, just a few blocks away in Gei Ben Hinnom. So the author, the anonymous author, is getting very personal in the last third of the poem. And he says, I'm sorry, yes?
Is this one of the Moshe Rabbeinu's theory?
There is a theory that all of the tzadis, all of the 90s were written by Moshe Rabbeinu. I just don't see it for this one.
11,
Yeah. But then it's in the 90s. It's in this section where the ones they attribute to Moshe Rabbeinu. And I didn't say it because, I didn't say it because it doesn't really seem to be his time period. The material that he's, of course, Moshe was a prophet, so he saw the future in many cases. But it seems like the poet lived. I go with those scholars and Jewish scholars as well. I'm not just talking about historians, secular historians. That this sounds like it was written in the 700s BCE. It just does. The problems he's talking about and the sentiments that he's espousing, where the nation was really threatened so severely, and they felt abandoned. They didn't feel the power of Hashem like they did in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's a midrash that lists a number of poems that were written by Psalms that were written by Moshe Rabbeinu. So mi yakum li im mereim. Who is going to stand up for me or set me up or help me recover if these bad guys come and do these? When these bad guys come and do these things to me, mi yitzat save li. Who's going to again stand me up? What's the difference between kum and nitzav? Kum literally means to get up. Nitzav means to be more firmly established, stability in Yatziv. So the beginning was, who's just going to get me up off the ground? Who's going to pick me up out of the dust? The second one, and who's going to solidify my position so that I can stand strong and proud? Impoale oven, with all of these bad guys doing bad things. Poale means acting. They act out. Oven means despicable acts, perverted behavior. Who's going to protect me and help me withstand those bad times? And the answer is in Yud Zayin. It's also a request, but it's an answer. Lule Hashem. If only Hashem Ezratali would help me. In other words, the understanding is it's going to have to come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It hasn't yet come. That's why the term lule. He's begging for it, but he understands that the ultimate ability to stand and to thrive comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's the beginning one is survive, kum, and nitzav is more like, thrive, really, not just make it through, but make it through, in good shape. Kimat shochna duma nafshi. It's almost as if my soul went down to silent, which means death. It's a very poetic way of shochna duma is like the ultimate silence. And the ultimate silence is really death. It's like I felt like I was really, on my way towards the bad stuff was so bad. I really felt like it had almost killed me. It had almost silenced my soul. Duma nafshi. Shachna duma nafshi. It's almost silenced nafshi, my soul. Please, b'fakasha.
Well, it sort of contradicts your Dalet and Tetvav. Already he found where this is salvation.
No. That's why I said that the last section seems like a brand new poem, because now he's talking about his own personal struggles with these things. It's like he solved the national problems, and now he's turning to. No, I'm glad you made that comment, because I was trying to make that point before.
Why does that one fail?
I'm sorry?
Why is this is really?
The people ask the question was this put together from two different poems? So really, I'm going to say at the end that I really think it is one poem, because at the end he's sort of going to return back to some of the ideas at the beginning. But it's like he just turned his attention from the national issue to the personal issue. And now we get to Yudchet and Yudtet. And I hope I leave myself enough time at the end when we talk about the place of this poem in our liturgy and in our in our spiritual lives, because there's a beautiful tune to these two verses. And at the end, I'll play the tune for you. A tune, yeah. So but I want to wait till I get to the end, because I don't know how to do it in the middle when I'm recording. So I'm gonna, when I get to the end, and hopefully there'll be enough time. But what's interesting about the tune was written by Reb Meir Shapiro. It was written by the famous founder of Daf Yomi, He was the head of the yeshiva Chachmei Lublin, of course, in Lublin, and he suffered a lot. He suffered a lot, and part of his tragedy was he spent most of his life raising money for the yeshiva, and they finally, in the mid to late 30s, built a magnificent building in Lublin, only for the Nazis then to come and destroy it.
Building is there.
The building is still there, but destroyed the building is still there, and it was used as some sort of factory, I think, during the Russian period, during the communist period. Now it's been restored, yeah. But he didn't live to see that. He died around 1960. It's a funny thing. Rivka and I went to visit Rivka's parents' graves in Har Menuchot, and just about 6 graves over is Rabbi Shapiro. So the last time we went was Zion Marcheshvin, and we had no idea it was his yortzeit. And so it was like, boy, was it crowded. And although Rivka's parents were wonderful, I remember her father, Rabbi Goldstein, all of them very, very well. They weren't coming to see them. They were all coming to see, and there was somebody doing interviews. It was really like, but anyways, at the end, and this poem really was important to Rabbi Shapiro, and it was sung by the young men in the yeshiva, specifically on Wednesday. We're going to talk about that at the end. And he really did have a lot of trials and tribulations in his attempts to build the yeshiva. He worked very hard. And when he finally saw it built, it all came crashing down. So let's take a look at the line, which I love. And after davening on Wednesday, I often hum the poem to myself. By the way, in yeshiva in the 90s, in Efrat, we used to sing this after davening on Wednesdays. There was one young man who came in 92, I think it was, 92, 93, and he started it, and then throughout the 90s, we used to sing it every Wednesday after davening. It's very nice. And you'll see how it fits in at the end. Imamati motoragli. If I said, if I noticed, if I commented on the fact of motoragli, that my foot was slipping, that my feet couldn't get hold, that I felt like I was falling off my feet. Chastecha Hashem yisadeni. Your kindness, God, will always support me. You're walking down the street and you start to fall, and you feel, oh my God, I'm going to fall. But there's someone next to you, and they grab you and hold you up. This is the image that Kadosh Baruch Hu is doing this to us all the time. We're stumbling through life, and Kadosh Baruch Hu somehow is stopping us from total disaster, from falling. And it's just a beautiful image. It's a beautiful image that Kadosh Baruch Hu is lending us a hand to make it through the tough times. Yisad, sa'ad, support is a beautiful term. Of course, it comes into modern Hebrew. We usually think of it as meals, su'udah, but that means sustenance. So you could translate it, sustain me. I think support me works best, personally, but you could say easily sustain. And that's what a su'udah is, sustenance. See how that works. Okay. The other word that goes through this is berov sharapai bikirbi, with the multitude of. Now the simple translation is thoughts, but in this particular case, I like the translation of the Koran Tehillim, which was done by what's his name? Rabbi Weinreb, which is anxieties. I like this. I like that. Remember, he's a psychologist, okay? With the multitude of my anxieties within me, there are all of these churning ideas which are difficult for me to deal with. They're inside. I even have trouble expressing them. So inside of me, there is churning all of this anxiety, Tanchumecha yisha'ashu nafshi. Your comforting, yisha'ashua nafshi, gives my soul sha'ashua. I'm going to say pleasure or delight. I'd probably delight is probably the best. You, God, when I feel that you are, embracing me, supporting me, encouraging me, I feel this anxiety, these black clouds have dissipated. Now you could say that Sharpai is actually perhaps even depression, but there's another word for that, dikaon. So I think I like Rabbi Weinreb's anxieties. And all the time things are happening around you and inside you. You have all these thoughts. You don't even know how to express them, whatever. And then something happens. You daven, or Shabbos comes. You say Kiddush or something like that. And and then so that's the end of the verse. How do you translate that into English? I don't know. H. Okay, but those two verses again go together. Okay, and again it's very personal, but yet it ends with this sense of that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there to lend you that hand when you need it, to just give you, to give you that succor and support and sustenance. It's very, very powerful. Then Chaf and Chaf Aleph sort of go together. Hachavracha kisei havus. Now this is talking about Yotze Amal Alechok, that there's a throne that's doing bad stuff, that is destroying the efforts of chok, of the law. It's this verse that more than any other, that for me points to the fact that this was written while we had those lousy kings in the 700s BCE, because he's talking about the throne where you're supposed to look to for support and guidance. And what have they done? They have destroyed the sense of law in the country. They're the source of the lawlessness. That's what's saying in Chaf Aleph. Yogudu al nefesh tzadik v'dam naki yarshiu. This verse is a paraphrase of another verse that's in the book of Yeshayahu, when finally a good king came in, Yoshiyahu, okay, and he set up judges. That this idea, one of the warnings against them was never find guilty dam naki, innocent blood. In other words, and this is something I talked about 2 weeks ago when I quoted the last line. When I quoted the last line from the movie, Judgment at Nuremberg, and the Spencer Tracy character says to the Burt Lancaster character. Spencer Tracy is an American country judge from, I believe he was from the Midwest, like Missouri. That's why I said it. He reminded me of Truman, okay? And then the other guy, Burt Lancaster, played a judge who had been a good judge before the Nazis came in, but then cooperated with the Nazis. And at the end of the movie, Burt Lancaster says to Spencer Tracy, he said, I want you to know that I never thought it would come to this. I was trying to make the best of the situation. And Spencer Tracy says, it came to this the first time an innocent person was executed. It didn't happen after 1 million innocents were killed. It happened after 1 innocent was killed. And that's what we're saying here in Chaf Aleph. Yagudu al nefesh tzadik. that we have this concern. We're talking about a righteous soul, and we're worried about V'dam Naki Yarshi'u. These bad judges are finding guilty, clean blood, innocent souls. And this again is going back to this particular part is not personal. In the middle of this personal section, he goes back to talk about the major problem of the nation. And the major problem of the nation has two parts to it. Number one, the king is corrupt. And number two, the judges don't deliver justice. So this part, which is a sort of a wrap-up of what we said way at the beginning of the poem, is talking about a social situation which does really seem to describe what was going on in the 700s BCE, both in the northern tribe until northern kingdom, which was destroyed in 722 BC, and then in the southern tribes, which continued after that and stayed in power until we know 586 before the Common Era. So that's Chaf Aleph, and Chaf Aleph, which are bad. And then the last two verses sum up both the personal problem and then the national problem. V'yoshev alehem et, I skipped, I'm sorry. I was going to the right. V'yehi Hashem li, back to personal, lemizgav. Now, mizgav is not so easy to translate. I don't like the translations which mostly say fortress, stronghold. I don't like that translation. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. I'm sorry? High tower. Yeah, that's the same idea. Yeah. Stronghold, fortress, high tower. I'm going to tell you why I don't like that in a minute. Ve'elokai litzur machzik, that's a fortress. Okay? That my God is a tzur, right? An immovable object, a massive rock. Okay? Machsi, that gives me cover. That's more of the fortress idea. The reason I don't like Mizgav because as fortress is because I'd like this verse to be talking about two issues. One is emotional safety, and the other is physical safety. And I'd like the first half to be the more emotional. And I'm going to explain to you why. We all know the word mizgav. Mizgav ladach. Mizgav ladach literally means, and I like the translation of Targum Yonatan is sa'ad, support. Support for those who are dach, and dach is like from dikaon. Support those who are oppressed or depressed. Support for the depressed. And that expression, mizgav ladach, is in Psalm 9. So it's repeating that term, and I think someone who is bedikaon, someone who is in depression, doesn't need a fortress. They need support. They need a helping hand. They need a hug. So I like the idea that Mizgav here, and then I think it's good for the poem because he talked about emotional difficulties. So the first half of the poem is HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides me with emotional support, and then the end of the line, and physical safety. Because there's a lot of angst in the poem over the fact that the source of power in the country has gone over to the dark side, that the power in the country has become corrupt. And the person is upset about it. Again, that's Sarapai, that's Mataragli, that's someone who needs Nichumim. And that so in other words, he needs this emotional support. And I think that's the first half of the pasuk that I got it. He got it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then the second one, I ultimately believe that God is going to provide me with the safety that I need in these difficult situations as well. And then comes the last verse. And the last verse is really goes back to the first verse. Is one of the reasons that I think that even though there are some scholars that think that it was two poems which were put together, this last verse seems to return to the issue at the beginning. V'yashev alehem et onam. That's very much like the second verse, Hashev gemul al geim, and return upon them their iniquities, their corruption, their bad deeds, their sins, however you want to translate onam, okay? Return, and that's like the end of verse 2, where it says, Hashev gemul al geim, let their own bad deeds go back against the haughty. Okay, so now that he's returning to the beginning of the poem, which is why I think that it's all one unit. Ubira'atam yatzmitain, and in their evil, let them be wiped out. Destroyed. I like wiped out, actually, for yatzmitain. And then, like the first verse, which repeats the word nekama, this verse, that's why the style said, repeats the term yatzmitain. But look what happened at the end of the poem. He's talking about wiping out people. But who does the wiping out? Not Kael or Elokim from the beginning of the poem, but Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, the God of mercy and compassion, which means ultimately punishing those who oppress others is a mercy, is an act of compassion and empathy. Stopping them from doing their acts of evil and destruction of society is ultimately an act of Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. It's not just justice. Let me say that sentence again. It's not only justice. Sounds better that way. It's not only justice. I'm editing myself in real time. It's not only justice, it's also compassion for the oppressed. Okay? Do you see how that works? At the beginning, there's a plea towards Kael, Elokim, God of justice. At the end, it's asking for God for compassion. And I think it's also empathy. We want Hashem to have empathy for us, is what he's talking about there. Hashem Elokeinu, Lord our God. Okay, I'm basically done with the poem, although we're going to return to a couple of points in it. But now we want to talk about why is this the poem for Wednesday. And so the first answer that's given is in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. And I got to be honest, I'm embarrassed. I don't like this answer so much. But this is the famous answer. Remember, the Gemara's contention is that everything in the poem, in the poems chosen for the days, reflects back on what happened in the 6 days of creation. So the Gemara says, Shabara Chama Ulevana. In modern Hebrew, we'd say Shemesh v'Yareach. The sun and the moon were created on the fourth day. Okay? Ve'atid. So what's that got to do with punishing bad guys? Oh, right. That's a nice midrash. That's not what they say. I understand that there was this internal conflict. Okay? No, what the Gemara says, ve'atid li para me ovdehem. And God in the future is going to punish those who worshipped them. In other words, the prototypical forms of Avodah Zarah were sun and moon worship. And this is in many Gemaras, and Psukim also, that the quintessential versions of Avodah Zarah were sun worship and moon worship. And so what we're talking about on Wednesday is we're taking vengeance on behalf of the sun and the moon. When Hashem punishes the bad guys, it's because he's having compassion, not on the nation, he's having compassion on the sun and the moon, who want to serve Hashem, but yet they became vehicles for idolatry. So that's what the Gemara says. I don't know. I don't see in the poem idolatry as a major issue. We're talking about a lot of bad deeds, but avodat elim, worshiping false gods, it doesn't seem to be the issue. The issue here seems to be injustice. And for us, idolatry isn't a major issue. For us, we're much more concerned with issues of social justice than we are with idolatry. In other words, we're not concerned that our leaders are going to sacrifice their children to idolatry. We're worried that our leaders are, number one, going to fleece us, and number two, going to harm the fabric of a righteous society. Please.
You say that Wednesday was the day the sun and the moon
Were created in the first week of Genesis, right?
Well, there was also jealousy, according to the Midrash, between.
We just had reference to that, yeah, but they fought with each other too.
No, so what
But that's not the reference. The reference is that people worship them.
Yeah, no, so what it is that you have a sense that there was an injustice. You say the poem is discussing justice, which it is, So there was you felt there was an injustice done. And
The moon felt there was an injustice, but the only problem is the moon's complaint we don't believe was legitimate.
no, well,
Here we're talking about legitimate complaints. Now I understand what you're both saying, and you can fit it in. You can fit it in the jealousy and contention between the sun and moon, representing a contentious society. I'm not saying it's not a possibility,
so what do you suggest here?
but here's what I'm going to say. Yeah,
Oh, no, you say yours, please.
I'm going to say I think. No, not necessarily. I think that, yes, it's the day of the sun and the moon being created. What do the sun and the moon really provide us with? Life. Even the moon gives us, people really, I know in recent history, the last 500, 600 years, people were afraid of full moons. The crazies, the loonies come out in full. But historically, Jews loved the full moon because the full moon, most of our holidays, most of our most joyous occasions are on the time of full moon. Sukkot, Pesach, Tu B'Shvat, Tu B'Av, Purim. Half of the 15ths of the months are holidays because we love the full moon because there's a sense of security that the moon provides all that light. So I'm saying that Wednesday is the day when Hashem provided us with the vehicles of support and sustenance. And so that when you think things are going bad, remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the sun and the moon, and Hashem will ultimately take care of us. What's happening now is a passing fancy of society, okay? Like when the moon disappears at the end of the month, but it's going to come back. And the poem is saying, hold on. I'm sorry? Right, hitchadshut, renewal, excellent. That's like the Hasidic Shavot on it from the Gera Rebbe. Excellent. That there is a renewal that's going to come back. We will get back to where we're supposed to be, which a warm sun and a light-giving moon. Okay? So all of that stuff. By the way, it'd be nice to, if you could, go out into the desert on a night of a full moon. You can read by the light of the full moon in the desert because the sky is so clear. But so I think Wednesday is a day when we feel depressed. It's when the week is starting to wear on us. And one of the things that we say is this poem, Hashem is imamati mataragli. I felt like I'm slipping. I felt like I'm not going to make it through the week. Chastacha Hashem yisadeni. And that's why the custom is to say the first two verses of the next psalm after we say this. What are the first two verses of the next psalm? L'chu neranana l'Hashem. Come, let's show our joy, sing joyously before Hashem, which is Kabbalat Shabbat. So basically, part of the message here is the sun and the moon give us support, but then the rabbis added, hang in there, Shabbos is coming. They used to have a bumper sticker. in the States. Hang in there, Shabbos is coming. And I think that's the message of Wednesday. Because Wednesday is in the middle of the week, and it's the stuff is piling up. Okay, the stuff is piling up. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something?
Oh, well, to me, the Chidush Levana always resembled some sort of moon worship.
Yeah, we're going to go dance in front of the moon. That's why, I want you to know, that's why there's a custom. There's a custom that you should look away from the moon when reciting it. In other words, the custom is, but in the yeshivas especially, it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, but not that everybody does it. You look at the moon, and then you look away to say the bracha, so that no one will think, God forbid, that it's moon worship. But people do mistake it, especially at the end when you dance. But the idea is that we have, and again, this is what we're just saying. This hitchadshut is giving us hope, okay? Because the moon's coming back, we're supposed to feel that hope, but we're not supposed to be worshiping toward the moon. And that's why when you say the bracha, you turn away from the moon, so that nobody thinks, God forbid, that you're davening to the moon. Now, this is not my minhag. This is a Kabbalistic custom, and some Nusach Sfard people do it, but I don't. And that it says, and this is Nusach Sfard. It's Osat Tefillot. This is like an amazing parish on davening, and it says, V'yechaven, and you should have in mind when you read this poem, Sheyavo bo. Sorry, it's so small. Sheyavo bo ha'arat ruach yetera mishabat haba'ah. And you should have intent when you read this poem that there should come to you an enlightened spirit from the Shabbat which is coming. The custom is to start saying that on Wednesday and say that on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Have in mind that when you say the Shir Shel Yom, that the ha'ara, the light, the enlightenment of the forthcoming Shabbos should help you and support you. Until Tuesday, on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, you say the exact same line, except you say, V'yechaven she'yisha'er bo, that you should have in mind that there still remains for you ha'arat ruach yetera mishabat ha'avra. That, in other words, the afterglow of Shabbat, which is the halacha, and I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, we'll talk about Tuesday. Until Tuesday, you can say Havdalah. And starting on Wednesday, you can start being Makabel Shabbos. And a lot of people have the minhag. Starting on Wednesday, if you find in the store something special, you put it away for Shabbos. I know some people do it all week. That's the Pshita of Beit Shammai. But it seems like most of us, the thing is, starting on Wednesday, it's nice to start putting stuff away for Shabbos. L'chavod Shabbat. And that's like, and that's what I think the imamarti, mataragli. If I feel like I'm slipping, if I feel like I can't make it through, I have to feel that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to help me, and the help from Kadosh Baruch Hu is in the form of remembering Shabbos is coming, which is why we say L'chud Neranena at the end. And I just want to mention, just before we end, that it's not the minhag of the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon, who was very makpid, very careful, that the Shir Shel Yom was only what the Levium said in the Beit HaMikdash. And the Levium did not say the first two verses of Psalm 95. And so therefore the Vilna Gaon, and so his students don't say it. And usually I follow Minhag Agra, but not this time. They don't say L'chud Neranena. Because the Shir Shel Yom that the Levium said in the Beit HaMikdash, and that was not said by the Levium in the Beit HaMikdash. They only said Psalm 94, so he didn't add it. The custom to add it started in the 1500s. So he was against it. But this is one time that I don't listen to the Gra. I like saying these two because I like the idea of thinking, like again, hang in there. Shabbat is coming. Okay, I'm gonna stop the tape. I'm gonna take your question, and then I want to play I want to play quickly the song, and it takes about 3 or 4 minutes, so we'll just have time. I'm sorry, was there a question? What did I?